So, what happens when the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, skips the rules to make a ruling? Justice Samuel Alito, God love the man, was joined by Justice Clarence Thomas, and they're not letting this slide quietly. What happened at midnight in the Supreme Court? I'm going to break down the dissent from Justice Alito. For those that do not know, in the dead of night, the Supreme Court skipped over the rules, and we're going to talk about how they did it, to rule against the executive branch. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to talk to you about something so very important entitled When the Robes Rule the Republic. And this story goes right along with that tonight. Let's break down Justice Alito's scathing dissent against the Supreme Court's emergency intervention, done literally in the dead of night. Justice Alito calls it unprecedented and legally questionable. Let's unpack it line by line. Are you ready? I'm calling it midnight justice because the court was in a hurry. The court issued emergency relief after midnight without a full legal review or any government input. Justice Alito said it was hasty and premature. And my question tonight, as a casual observer, just your humble neighborhood friendly fluffy professor, my question, since when does the highest court in the land operate like a backroom committee? Justice Alito mentioned the All Writs Act, all ALL writs, WRITS, for those that take notes during my show. I hope you do, so you can go study these things for yourself. My job here is not to build a following, it's to educate the followers, the ones I have. The All Writs Act. The Supreme Court used the All Writs Act to justify them skipping over all the rules. But Justice Alito says not so fast, because that act does not grant new jurisdiction. It only supports existing authority. This move, he argues, stretched the law beyond its bounds. In other words, there's some tomfoolery going on in the SCOTUS. They pulled an old legal lever, but it was attached to the wrong machine. Midnight shenanigans in the SCOTUS. Alito questions whether the appellate court even had jurisdiction to begin with. The supposed appeal was not even from a denied injunction. It was from a constructive denial, meaning the judge didn't act fast enough. And the Fifth Circuit later agreed that they did not have jurisdiction. So, Professor Toto's question is this: can courts rule on cases that technically don't even exist yet? In other words, the Fifth Circuit has admitted they lack jurisdiction. So, how is the Supreme Court ruling on a case that doesn't even exist? Asked Judge Alito. The detainees that have been deported, their attorneys gave the district court 45 minutes to issue a ruling on Good Friday, no less. And when that court did not act within 45 minutes, They declared, the prosecutors did, or the attorneys rather, that it was a denial and rushed to appeal to the Fifth Circuit. But Justice Alito said that that was a stunt that failed to meet the basic standards for emergency relief request. Under Supreme Court Rule 23.3, you're supposed to seek relief from the lower courts first. The court never even heard from the government. Did you hear me? There was no response brief, no oral arguments, just one side of the case. And Judge Alito finds that deeply troubling in a matter this serious. Now, in a criminal trial, this would be like sentencing a man without ever hearing from the defense. Now, I want to encourage you tonight. I believe that the Supreme Court will lift this hold because we always win in the end. I do believe that they did this just to buy some time, but I do not believe it is going to stand. The applicants claimed they were facing immediate deportation, but they had no proof of that. In fact, in a different case, a government lawyer said no deportations were scheduled for days. So was the Supreme Court played? Absolutely. The court granted relief to a whole class of people, but the district court never certified a class. Alito said habeas proceedings have never been used for class-wide relief. You see, ladies and gentlemen, you can't just hand out a blanket when nobody's asked for one the right way. Alito slams the court for acting without full jurisdiction, without lower court rulings, without a government response, questionable evidence, and without explanation. This is the judicial equivalent of ready, aim, fire. It's the same thing. Alito closed his dissent with a rebuke, not just to the government, but his fellow justices. He calls on the court to follow established procedures and to not make exceptions based on pressure or politics. Wow. When justices are sounding the alarm on their own court, maybe we should all listen. Midnight rulings with murky legal footing don't just hurt the integrity of the court, they undermine the very rule of law. Justice should never sneak through the back door. And when it does, Justice Alito is there to flip on the light. Have no fear. Now that brings me to something that I want to discuss tonight. And this is not my monologue, but it's very important. I want to talk to you about when the robes rule the republic. My fellow patriots, truth seekers, sons of liberty, what's happening in our courts is a warning. It's more than a warning. It's a blazing alarm from the very heart of our republic. Because what happened this weekend with the Supreme Court was not just a legal delay, it was a constitutional earthquake between the executive and the judicial branch. Let me say this plainly tonight. Judicial supremacy is a poison in this nation, and it's killing America's constitutional order. In the early hours of Saturday morning, while you were sleeping, the Supreme Court issued a quiet, one-page order that completely tied the hands of the agenda of the United States president to deport dangerous Venezuelan gang members under law. The law is called the Alien Enemies Act. Now, let's pause right there. We're not talking about criminals, ordinary criminals, run of the mill. No. Let me tell you what we're talking about. Gang members, Venezuelan nationals, known threats. And yet, the highest court in our land just told the President of the United States, hold it. You're not allowed to act. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The Constitution, that dusty old document that they swore to uphold, clearly gives the president Article 2 power over immigration enforcement, clearly without any ambiguity whatsoever. It is the executive branch that enforces the law, not the judiciary. So why is a majority of Supreme Court justices acting like they are the final say in deportation orders? Alito was so disappointed in his own court. So I want to ask you tonight, fellow Americans, who is actually running this country? Is it the man elected by the people? Methinks not. Or is it the unelected lawyers in black robes who have forgotten their boundaries? Because what we are seeing is not constitutional government. It is judicial supremacy. We are watching the robes rule the republic. John Daniel Davidson at the Federalist put it perfectly when he said, the founders never intended for the judiciary to be the sole arbiter of what is and isn't constitutional. Yes, the courts interpret the law, but that doesn't mean they are supreme over the executive or the legislature. Their duty was to judge. They render a judgment of whether something is constitutional or not. Then the other branch of government determines whether to accept that judgment or not. If that judgment is violating their rights, then they can say, as one former president did, John Marshall made his ruling, now let him enforce it. They were meant to be co-equal, not monarchs in robes. But today, the judiciary is not interpreting law, it's creating them. It's blocking the enforcement of those laws. It's deciding which laws count, which laws don't, like they've been crowned high priest of the American law. Just think about Roe v. Wade, a law made not in the legislature, a law made from thin air. 50 years of murder in America was made legal because of an opinion, not a law passed by the people. Think about that. Americans, how long do we sit down and say nothing? That's not constitutional. That's supremacism, judicial supremacism. Now you might be thinking, well, maybe the Supreme Court will reverse this halt. Maybe they'll do the right thing, and maybe they will. But the point is this: time is not our friend. Donald Trump is running out of time that we voted him in to take advantage of. If we lose the midterms, time is over. You know as well as I do, there will be an impeachment if we lose the midterms by Hakeem Jeffries. The fact that Trump even needs the court's permission to do what the Constitution already empowers him to do is a problem. Unless and until President Trump and the Congress begins to challenge judicial overreach, we will continue to be ruled, not governed, by unelected oligarchs in black robes. This is not how the founders drew it up. This is not how freedom survives. This is not how a republic stands. Judicial supremacy is not law and order. It's lawlessness in the name of order. And if America doesn't wake up soon, we're going to find out what happens when the president loses his sword and the court swings it for him. I hope you heard what I just said. When the president loses his sword so the court can swing it for him, guess what? We, the people, can impeach a president, but we have no power over judges. Think about that for a moment. Let that percolate, saturate, ingratiate what I just said. We, the people, can impeach a president, but if he's a swordless president, then we really have no power, do we? For if we cannot impeach these judges, and they now swing the president's sword, truly, it's all just a joke.